No British theme park is more historic or iconic than Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Located in Blackpool, England, this beachside park features a variety of roller coasters that date all the way to the early 1900s. Of course, with such a rich history, there are plenty of attractions that have come and gone over the years. So as is common on this channel, let's take a look at the former coasters of this park from oldest to newest. Number 10. Switchback, opened in 1891, closed in the 1920s. This was the first roller coaster to open at Blackpool Pleasure Beach and the fourth roller coaster to open in the entire United Kingdom. This coaster was one of many L.A. Thompson Switchback Railways. These were the first mass-produced roller coasters and the first ones to be specifically designed for amusement parks. After the first one opened at Brooklyn's Coney Island in 1884, they became so popular that they were installed all over the world. These wooden coasters had no turns, no chain lifts, and no seat belts. A while after the UK's first Switchback Railway at the defunct Ramsgate Pier, the coaster model made its way to Blackpool in the late 1800s. Of course, newer and more modern roller coaster models eventually made the Switchback Railway outdated, and all of them have since been torn down. But although the Switchback Railway is extinct, its impact on the roller coaster industry is undeniable. We truly wouldn't have any of the thrill rides of today without it. Number 9. Scenic Railway, opened in 1907, closed in 1933. 16 years after the Switchback Railway opened, the L.A. Thompson Company designed a bigger and better attraction for the park. Unlike the Switchback Railway, the Scenic Railway was a side friction coaster that featured a chain lift and a much longer layout. While its height and speed stats are minuscule by today's standards, it was certainly an impressive attraction in the early 1900s. Much like the Switchback Railway though, these side friction coasters became outdated as the roller coaster industry continued to blossom with new innovations. So after the 1933 season, the simple Scenic Railway was replaced with Grand National, a brand new racing wooden coaster that is still operating. Although side friction coasters aren't considered high-level thrill rides by today's standards, there are still a few of them operating, including Scenic Railway at Dreamland, another English amusement park. So for those of you history buffs, this one in particular is a must-ride. Number 8. Velvet Coaster, opened in 1909, closed in 1932. This was another wooden coaster that was originally advertised as the longest roller coaster in the world, and allegedly cost the park $50,000, which is quite a lot when adjusted for inflation. This side friction coaster opened just 2 years after Scenic Railway and would end up closing the year before it. Not much is known about this coaster, except that it was modified to have longer and steeper drops in the early 1920s. Eventually though, after over 20 years of operation, this coaster was taken down and replaced with a shorter and more modern coaster simply named Roller Coaster. This new coaster was built by Charles Page and actually reused the Velvet Coaster's lift hill and other assorted sections in the layout. Nowadays, the ride is known as Nickelodeon Streak, sporting an orange paint job and new bright green trains. Although the original Velvet Coaster is gone, a pub near the park would end up being named after it. The pub first opened in 2015 and is currently serving up some amazing IPAs and scrumptious bangers and mash. The pub is in walking distance from the park, so you can head down for a pint after a day of thrill seeking. Number 7. Virginia Reel, opened in 1922, closed in 1982. Ah yes, the Virginia Reel, the once popular wooden roller coaster model that has since gone extinct. Long before the days of Pandemonium, this was the first spinning coaster model, with the first one opening in 1908. This type of ride was invented by Henry Elmer Reel and named after his daughter, Luna Virginia Reel. So no, the coaster has nothing to do with the state of Virginia. It's just the middle name of the daughter of the man who invented it. The trains on these coasters featured tubs with seats built around the inside. After an initial chain lift to the top, the tubs would spin freely down a zigzag track layout with a few dips and bank turns thrown in too. While these rides were initially very popular among amusement parks, they didn't exactly age well. By the 1980s, the one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach became both complicated and expensive to maintain, and the coaster was largely considered to be unsafe. After all, there were no seat belts on this coaster, and all guests had to hold onto was the bar behind them. So for various reasons, in 1982, the coaster was torn down and the Virginia Reel went extinct. However, you can still check out a similar experience at Joyland Children's Fun Park. The Tyrolean Tub Twist is the only spinning side friction coaster still in operation, and it too features a zigzag track layout. No one knows if the true Virginia Reel will ever return, but if Knoebels can bring back the Flying Turns coaster, anything is possible. Number 6. Wild Mouse, opened in 1958, closed in 2017. While Wild Mouse coasters can be found pretty much anywhere, this one was actually very iconic. After the park's lack of of investment during World War II, Wild Mouse was the first roller coaster to be built in over 20 years. Unlike most Wild Mouse coasters, this one was wooden, giving it a much more vintage feel than other rides of its kind. Unfortunately, wooden coasters are naturally harder to maintain than steel ones, so over the years, this attraction and other wooden Wild Mouse rides have undergone constant refurbishments. This included the installation of a new magnetic brake system in 2017 to eliminate the need for a manual brake system. However, this particular refurbishment reportedly led to more frequent technical issues and extended downtime. In addition, there were reportedly disputes as to whether the ride's constant refurbishments and technical upgrades still made it worthy of its landmark status. Some would argue that it's more of a newer roller coaster than the historic one that people remember. All of this allegedly led to the surprise decision to close the coaster down after the 2017 season to make room for future developments. Many enthusiasts and fans of the park lamented the decision to remove such a historic attraction, and it's arguably the most sorely missed attraction in the park's history. Still though, it's pretty impressive that the park managed to keep this coaster operating for over half a century. Number 5. Cyclone. Opened in 1974, closed in 1987. This was the first steel roller coaster to open at the park. Back in the day, Pinfari dominated the steel coaster market with their Zyklons. This one in particular was a Z40 model, the same as Rolly's coaster at Morey's Piers. It's unknown how popular the ride originally was, but in 1987 the coaster was closed down to make room for Avalanche, the park's Mack bobsled coaster. The next year it was relocated to the now defunct Frontierland family theme park and renamed Stampede, which is actually a pretty good name for a roller coaster. After a decade of operation though, the ride in Frontierland itself shut down and the coaster is likely scrap metal by now. Number 4. Tokaido Express. Opened in 1980, closed in 1997. In 1980, Pinfari struck Blackpool yet again with a coaster named Tokaido Express. This one in particular was a Pinfari Super Train, a now extinct powered coaster model. For those of you who don't know, powered coasters are rides that use electricity to send riders through the course instead of gravity alone. Much like monorails, the trains pick up electricity from contacts in the rails, sending it to the motor on board and thus powering the coaster through the layout. Coaster enthusiasts often debate whether or not these rides are considered credits. Some argue that true roller coasters only run on gravity, while others argue that some powered coasters still have gravity-powered areas. But that's a discussion for another video. Moving on, Tokaido Express was a relatively short family attraction that traveled in a simple figure-8 layout. Not much else is known about this coaster either, except that in 1988, the park installed a cover over the ride to protect its parts from the rain. 17 years after its opening, the ride was moved to Breen Theme Park and renamed Figure of 8, referencing its simple layout. 3 years after its reopening though, the coaster was removed from the park and reportedly scrapped for good. Since then, the Pinfari powered coaster has gone extinct, so if you got to ride one of these when they were still around, consider it an elusive coaster credit. Number 3. Space Invader 2. Opened in 1984, closed in 2008. Originally opening in 1984, Space Invader was the only indoor roller coaster to operate at the park. Its outer space theme and one per row trains made it very similar to Black Hole at Alton Towers. However, while Black Hole was a Jetstar 2, this coaster was a Zero 4-man bob. This coaster featured a lot more theming during the ride. It featured detailed sculptures of astronauts, aliens, and a giant satellite that hung from the ceiling. With its family-friendly appeal and thrilling twists and turns, it was the perfect attraction to beat the heat in the bad weather. Unfortunately, the ride's popularity was seriously damaged in 2000 when a passenger stood up during the ride and died after falling from the vehicle. While neither the ride nor the park was found at fault for the incident, park officials wanted to modify the coaster to prevent passengers from being able to stand up in the first place. After a failed attempt to add over-the-shoulder restraints, lap bars were put on the coaster's trains in 2003. In addition to the new restraints, the coaster received a new name, Space Invader 2. Space Invader 2 wouldn't last long though. After failing an evacuation drill in 2008, the coaster was put into standing but not operating status. After 2 years of sitting on the property, the coaster was removed from its building and, like Tokaido Express, was sent to Breen Theme Park. There it was renamed Astrostorm and continues to operate as an indoor roller coaster. It is also the only Zero 4-man bob still in operation, making it another rare credit to pick up. Number 2. Circus Clown. Opened in 1989, closed in 2008. This was yet again another coaster by Pinfari. Formerly located at Littlehampton's Harbour Park, this ride opened at Blackpool sometime around 1989. While it was a very tame kiddie coaster, those of you with a fear of clowns may consider this to be a terrifying thrill ride. The train had a giant clown face on the front of it, and a rather creepy looking sculpture of a clown with two faces stood by the track. The simple oval-shaped layout also featured a large drum that the train would pass through, much like the apple on certain Wacky Worms. It would operate all the way until 2008 and would later be replaced with a new Zamperla Aero top jet named Fairy World Taxi Spin. Believe it or not though, this coaster is still operating about 3 hours away at Wicksteed Park. Unfortunately for you coulrophobics out there, this ride is still themed to clowns, so be prepared for nightmares if you choose to ride this one. Number 1. Big Apple. Opened in 2003, closed in 2004. Yes, Blackpool Pleasure Beach had a Wacky Worm, and yes, it only operated for 1 year. While it seems like there'd be nothing to say about this ride, it actually has an interesting history. Before operating at Blackpool, it was located at Frontierland Family Theme Park. Like other Wacky Worms, it featured a giant apple that the train would pass through. However, after being relocated to Blackpool and unpacked, park officials discovered that the coaster's apple was missing. Yes, somehow a giant 30-foot apple managed to go missing.
How on earth do you lose a 30-foot apple?
Blackpool's director of operations at the time had this to say about it.
I'm a fairly appleable guy, but I'm not impressed that we've managed to lose a 30-foot apple. This is a big feature of the ride, and the kids are missing out on a fun part of the attraction.
Despite the loss of its apple though, the ride was open to the public anyway, and would operate for a year until being purchased by showman Paul Hart. As for the giant apple, if you live in England, keep an eye out for it, because it may still be out there. Hashtag find that apple. Thanks for watching everyone, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.